We want to take a few moments and recognize the tragic news today that Gene Peltola, husband of Alaska Congresswoman Mary Peltola, died in what her office says was a plane accident. There aren't many details on that yet. I'm sure there will be more news on that later. Eugene Buzzy Peltola was a notable Alaska Native leader in his own right. He was an Arakmutsu Native Council tribal member. He was the former regional director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs for Alaska. He spent 34 years working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Alaska as well. He was vice mayor and council member for the city of Bethel between 2010 and 2012. And Mary Peltola is, of course, the first Alaska Native person elected to Congress. And Buzzy was there by her side during her campaign. And joining us now from Anchorage, Alaska, is LaMont Albertson. He works with an Intertribal Fish Commission, and he worked with Buzzy Peltola in a professional capacity for many years, but he has known him personally since Peltola was just a young child. And Lamont, thanks for coming on to talk with us today. And first, I want to express my condolences for your friend and colleague, and I wish we were talking under better circumstances. Tell us more. When did you first meet Buzzy Peltola?
Well, I met Buzzy back before he could remember. I'm sure he was about a year old or 2 years old at the most. In fact, I picked him up, held him. I was visiting his mom, Pam, and his dad, Gene Peltola Sr. So his dad led the HC company at the time over in Antioch, Alaska.
Wow. Wow. Go back a lot of years. And
Yeah.
Lamont, since his wife Mary got elected, she's just gotten so many headlines, and she's such a leader across all of Indian country and among Alaska Native communities. But Buzzy, of course, was a very, very well respected Native leader in his own right, and he held a number of high level positions. And can you tell us a little bit about how he was able to achieve his success, and tell us a little bit more about his career arc?
Well, he was a very intelligent young man. It's impossible to exaggerate how smart he was because he was just as smart. But and he was anything that you could think of that he was challenged by. He saw it as a challenge. He did not see solving problems as problems per se, but he saw them as challenges, and he went about the business of trying to figure out how to get things done. He was a leader of men. I don't mean just Native men, but Caucasian men. It didn't matter who you respected his intelligence. He was one of the leaders up here and trying, in my opinion, to make people understand what the needs of subsistence people were. And he took pains to explain exactly what subsistence needs were and why these people needed to have their kids learn in school and do the sort of thing that family people want to do along the Kuskokwim River. But he was one of the first people, in my opinion, who did a good job of explaining what subsistence needs were for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw him with his uncle, Ray Peltola Jr., up the Antioch River, and they had just shot a beautiful bull moose, a fantastic bull moose. But I was wondering why they weren't butchering the moose right at that time. So Buzzy explained to me that the first thing they did was fixed some tea and were thankful to God for their gift that they had been given with that moose and all the meat it represented. So we drank tea, and as soon as we drank tea, we all got to work on butchering that moose. But he
Mm.
was just, and it's impossible for me to exaggerate his intelligence and who he was.
It's a wonderful story, Lamont. And
Yeah.
uh, Buzzy Peltola, his father, Gene Peltola Sr., he was a trailblazer. And I know he went from becoming president of the Association of Village Council Presidents, and then he headed up one of the regional health corporations. And he was well respected for being a really keen strategist. Do you think some of that rubbed off on his son, Buzzy?
I think so, exactly. Gene Sr., he did not hesitate to speak to powerful people and tell them of the needs of our folks along the Kuskokwim River. And Gene Jr. was the same way, exactly the same way. He worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service and came to bat for us many, many times when we had the subsistence concerns. But he was just something else. Again, I can't exaggerate his intelligence.
LaMont, an interesting element to the Mary and Buzzy Peltola marriage is that they served on the Bethel City Council together, and it was about that time that they became a couple. And I'm curious, do you know how the town reacted when Mary and Buzzy became a couple? And did things change for them in any way after that with regard to their careers?
Well, I think so. But we both admired Bussy and Mary so much, and Mary is such a leader in her own right. But once they got together, we had two leaders together, so we could address our concerns when both of them were right there together. But I think the whole community was pretty supportive of them. The people that knew how much they meant to us as leaders, subsistence leaders out there, knew exactly what they were up against. We understood the ins and outs of that subsistence way of life, but I think the community was so glad they were both there. In fact, Mary since has been elected to a statewide office as our representatives, so we look to both of them as leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, LaMont, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. Again, this is all such tragic news that we learned about this morning. Again, the death of Gene Peltola, husband of Alaska Congresswoman Mary Peltola, who died in what was a plane accident earlier today. So condolences and remembrances have been pouring in for Gene Peltola over social media. Fellow Alaska Congresswoman Lisa Murkowski released a statement expressing her sadness. She said anyone who met Buzzy felt his warmth, generosity, and charm. Murkowski says it was easy to see why so many Alaskans called him a friend and how he was so beloved by his family. Alaska Governor Mike Dunleavy said Buzzy Peltola's dedication to Alaska ran deep and he will be dearly missed. And Anton McParland, Representative Peltola's chief of staff, said Buzzy Peltola was, in his own words, one of those people that was obnoxiously good at everything. He had a delightful sense of humor that lightened the darkest moments, and he simply adored Mary. Eugene Buzzy Peltola, before his time with the Bureau of Indian Affairs for Alaska from 2017 to 2022, he spent 34 years working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Alaska, and he was vice mayor and council member for the city of Bethel between 2010 and 2012. He served on several Alaska Native Village Corporation organizations, and he was the first Alaska Native to manage the Yukon Delta National Wildlife Refuge. LaMont, please, we're going to have to wrap up in about another minute or so, but anything else you would like to share about your dear friend and colleague, Gene Peltola?
Yeah, he had so much respect for his elders and the wiser people there in the Kuskokwim River, and that's exactly why he was so respected himself. There's one story, but I'm an elderly person. I'm going to be 80 on my next birthday, and so I had a stroke, as a lot of old people have. And then Gene Peltola Jr. and his wife, Mary Peltola, sent me subsistence foods so I could have the right foods to eat when I was recovering from my stroke. I'll never forget Gene and Mary for doing that.
Sounds like just wonderful, wonderful people, LaMont. And again, really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And condolences to you and everyone else there who knew and had a lot of respect for Gene Peltola and, of course, his wife, Mary Peltola.